The financial and environmental costs of oil can be high. The clean energy generated at Wigton wind farm reduces the need for fuel imported by 96,000 barrels annually, which translates to $4.9 million saved every year. And this saved foreign exchange can find its way to you through beneficial programs and projects. Because Wigton Wind Farm is working to secure Jamaica's future. Wigton Wind Farm is more than a premier supplier of wind energy. At Wigton's state-of-the-art Renewable Energy Lab, energy professionals, academics and tertiary students are trained in a range of subjects, such as photovoltaic technologies, wind, small-scale hydro, and bioenergy. And these students will become forerunners in the sector and aid its continued expansion. Wigton Wind Farm, working to secure Jamaica's future. Wigton didn't build the largest wind farm in the English-speaking Caribbean overnight. It required detailed planning, forging partnerships locally and overseas, digging kilometers of trenches, laying tons of steel, and pouring thousands of cubic meters of cement. And today, 44 wind turbines majestically stand on Wigton Wind Farm in Rose Hill, Manchester, a renewable energy plant that can power over 82,000 homes. Wigton Wind Farm, working to secure Jamaica's future. Jamaica's beauty is legendary, and we have to do our part to preserve our environment. The green energy generated at Wigton Wind Farm is better for our environment than fossil fuels because it decreases the amount of greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide that are released into the atmosphere. Wigton's clean energy reduces Jamaica's carbon dioxide emissions by 119,000 tons, which lessens the disastrous effects of climate change, like high temperatures and floods. Wigton Wind Farm, working to secure Jamaica's future. The financial and environmental costs of oil can be high. The clean energy generated at Wigton Wind Farm reduces the need for fuel imported by 96,000 barrels annually, which translates to $4.9 million saved every year. And this saved foreign exchange can find its way to you through beneficial programs and projects. Because Wigton Wind Farm is working to secure Jamaica's future. Wigton Wind Farm is more than a premier supplier of wind energy. At Wigton's state-of-the-art Renewable Energy Lab, energy professionals, academics and tertiary students are trained in a range of subjects, such as photovoltaic technologies, wind, small-scale hydro, and bioenergy. And these students will become forerunners in the sector and aid its continued expansion. Wigton Wind Farm, working to secure Jamaica's future. Wigton didn't build the largest wind farm in the English-speaking Caribbean overnight. It required detailed planning, forging partnerships locally and overseas, digging kilometers of trenches, laying tons of steel, and pouring thousands of cubic meters of cement. And today, 44 wind turbines majestically stand on Wigton Wind Farm in Rose Hill, Manchester, a renewable energy plant that can power over 82,000 homes. Wigton Wind Farm, working to secure Jamaica's future. Jamaica's beauty is legendary, and we have to do our part to preserve our environment. The green energy generated at Wigton Wind Farm is better for our environment than fossil fuels because it decreases the amount of greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide that are released into the atmosphere. Wigton's clean energy reduces Jamaica's carbon dioxide emissions by 119,000 tons, which lessens the disastrous effects of climate change, like high temperatures and floods. Wigton Wind Farm, working to secure Jamaica's future. The financial and environmental costs of oil can be high. The clean energy generated at Wigton Wind Farm reduces the need for fuel imported by 96,000 barrels annually, which translates to $4.9 million saved every year. And this saved foreign exchange can find its way to you through beneficial programs and projects. Because Wigton Wind Farm is working to secure Jamaica's future. Wigton Wind Farm is more than a premier supplier of wind energy. At Wigton's state-of-the-art Renewable Energy Lab, energy professionals, academics and tertiary students are trained in a range of subjects, such as photovoltaic technologies, wind, small-scale hydro, and bioenergy. And these students will become forerunners in the sector and aid its continued expansion. Wigton Wind Farm, working to secure Jamaica's future. Wigton didn't build the largest wind farm in the English-speaking Caribbean overnight. It required detailed planning, forging partnerships locally and overseas, digging kilometers of trenches, laying tons of steel, and pouring thousands of cubic meters of cement. And today, 44 wind turbines majestically stand on Wigton Wind Farm in Rose Hill, Manchester, a renewable energy plant that can power over 82,000 homes. Wigton Wind Farm, working to secure Jamaica's future. Jamaica's beauty is legendary, and we have to do our part to preserve our environment. The green energy generated at Wigton Wind Farm is better for our environment than fossil fuels because it decreases the amount of greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide that are released into the atmosphere. Wigton's clean energy reduces Jamaica's carbon dioxide emissions by 119,000 tons, which lessens the disastrous effects of climate change, like high temperatures and floods. Wigton Wind Farm, working to secure Jamaica's future. The financial and environmental costs of oil can be high. The clean energy generated at Waketon Wind Farm reduces the need for fuel imported by 96,000 barrels annually, which translates to $4.9 million saved every year. And this saved foreign exchange can find its way to you through beneficial programs and projects. Because Wigton Wind Farm is working to secure Jamaica's future. Wigton Wind Farm is more than a premier supplier of wind energy. At Wigton's state-of-the-art Renewable Energy Lab, energy professionals, academics and tertiary students are trained in a range of subjects such as photovoltaic technologies, wind, small-scale hydro, and bioenergy. And these students will become forerunners in the sector and aid its continued expansion. Wigton Windfarm, working to secure Jamaica's future. Wigton didn't build the largest wind farm in the English-speaking Caribbean overnight. It required detailed planning, forging partnerships locally and overseas, digging kilometers of trenches, laying tons of steel, and pouring thousands of cubic meters of cement. And today, 44 wind turbines majestically stand on Wigton Wind Farm in Rose Hill, Manchester, a renewable energy plant that can power over 82,000 homes. Wigton Wind Farm, working to secure Jamaica's future. Jamaica's beauty is legendary, and we have to do our part to preserve our environment. The green energy generated at Wigton Wind Farm is better for our environment than fossil fuels because it decreases the amount of greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide that are released into the atmosphere. Wigton's clean energy reduces Jamaica's carbon dioxide emissions by 119,000 tons, which lessens the disastrous effects of climate change, like high temperatures and floods. Wigton Wind Farm, working to secure Jamaica's future.
This is the 2020 Annual General Meeting of Wigton Windfarm Limited. Ladies and gentlemen, please stand for the playing of the National Anthem of Jamaica. You may be seated.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I am Oliver Holmes, Chairman of Wigton Windfarm Limited, and it is my privilege to welcome you to the 2020 Annual General Meeting of Wigton Windfarm Limited. As many of you may be aware, this AGM is being held pursuant to an order of the Supreme Court made on the 24th day of June 2020. The order is included in the 2020 annual report, which is available on Wigton's website and the Jamaica Stock Exchange's website. In keeping with the order, the meeting is being held as a hybrid meeting with just over 10 shareholders present in the room at the Jamaica Pegasus Hotel, as well as other shareholders joining the meeting via YouTube. Under the Articles of Incorporation of the company, 3 shareholders present at the meeting constitutes a quorum. Under the order of the court, 1 shareholder present at the meeting constitutes a quorum. The steps taken by the company were taken with the health and safety of the shareholders in mind, given that Wigton has one of the largest shareholder listings on the Jamaica Stock Exchange. The notice of the AGM, which advised of the hybrid format, as well as all the necessary information on the matters for consideration at the AGM, were published on Wigton's website and the JC's website. Notice of the meeting was also published in both daily newspapers, and announcements were made via radio, as well as online and social media. In addition to this, questions were solicited by email and via WhatsApp. Voting and proxy forms were provided by way of online and via email. 2 proxy forms were received. However, they did not meet the requirement as stipulated in the notice. 13 voting forms were received, covering the shares representing 0.0000000018% of the issued share capital of the company. I will now introduce our Corporate Secretary and Finance Manager, Mrs. Shawn Treasure, and I will ask her to advise whether the meeting is quorate. Mrs. Treasure.
Thank you, Chairman. As per Article 64 of the company's Articles of Incorporation, we do have a quorum.
Thank you, Mrs. Treasure. The meeting is now called to order. And may I request that the notice of the AGM, having been circulated in accordance with the Companies Act and the order of the court, be taken as read. All in favor? All against? I declare the motion carried. I will now ask Reverend Astor Carlisle, pastor of the Webster Memorial United Church, to lead us in prayer. Reverend Carlisle.
Let us pray. Great and wonderful God, how excellent is your name in all the earth. There are no boundaries to your benevolence. No boundaries or borders can contain your blessings. The coastline of your care is so vast that human tongue cannot begin to describe. We praise you for the resources and the people of this nation, the gifts of creative vision, the resilience, indomitable and charitable human spirit. We thank you that in the midst of a global pandemic, your Holy Spirit continues to help us to quarry those virtues within so as to make life sustainable and progressive. And so we pray your blessings upon Wigton Windfarm Limited, Grant that this annual general meeting will bolster our commitment to investing in Jamaica. We pray your continued grace upon the board of directors, your light of insight upon the management and staff, and the spirit of boldness for us all as we venture into the future. In the midst of our discussions today, remind us of your faithfulness in the past, your steadfast accompaniment now, and your uncompromising character in which we can trust. And grant that in our living and our giving, Jamaica may, under God, increase in beauty, fellowship, and prosperity, and play her part in advancing the welfare of the whole human race. We pray in the name of Jesus the Christ. Amen.
Thank you, Reverend Carlyle. Shareholders, it is now my pleasure to introduce the rest of the head table, starting on my right with Mr. Earl Barrett, Managing Director of Wigton Windfarm Limited. Earl? And to the far left, seated beside our Company Secretary, is Ms. Nerine Small, Attorney at Law who represents Wigton Windfarm Limited. Welcome, Nerine. I would also like to acknowledge members of the Board of Directors who are present with us this morning. And the directors present are Mr. Dennis Chung. Would you please stand and be identified? Thank you, Dennis. And similarly, Mr. Nigel Davey. Mr. Hugh Johnson. Thank you. Mr. Omar Azan. Mrs. Jacqueline Stewart Leckler. And Mr. Dan Theok. And joining us via live stream is Mrs. Georgia Gibson Henlin and Mr. Greg Shirley, all of whom constitute the full board. Let me also acknowledge members of the company's management team who are present. Ms. Michelle Chinlen, our project manager. Ms. Camille Taylor, in the back there. Camille Taylor, Communications Manager and Assistant Corporate Secretary. And joining us online is Mr. Rowan Hay, Operations Manager. And I've saved the best for last. I wish to especially acknowledge our shareholders who are in attendance with us this morning and those who are participating online. A very special welcome to you all. Shareholders, the stage is now set, so I can go right into the chairman's address. As shareholders, directors, and managers and employees of Wigton Windfarm Limited, many of us had the opportunity to be a part of Jamaica's history in 2019. In various capacities, we participated in what was then the largest public listing on the Jamaica Stock Exchange, when more than 30,000 of us decided to become involved in this company's future. For those of us engaged in the operations, management, and governance of Wigton, the 2019-2020 financial year was both demanding and exhilarating. It was a period of transition as we bolstered our business operations to meet the demands of our new commercial environment. It was a time of evolvement as we strengthened our corporate governance structure to ensure compliance and accountability with our increased regulatory requirements. It was also a season of changes and challenges as we grappled with the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. However, having passed the critical milestone that marked the end of year one, I'm pleased to report that it was also a period of achievements. While our Managing Director, Mr. Earl Barrett, will cover the ins and outs of our business operations, I will highlight the measures we have taken in the area of corporate governance and regulatory compliance to safeguard the company's good reputation and your investment. We broadened our governance framework to bolster our accountability processes and better support engagement with our stakeholders. We strengthened existing company policies and instituted new ones to ensure that all codes and protocols are aligned with the broader legislative requirements. We instituted board subcommittees to provide oversight and guidance for the most critical areas of our operations. I'm pleased to report that even while we're getting acclimatized to our new paradigm, we were able to meet all our statutory obligations. Similar positive results were seen on the commercial side of the business, as, even in the face of far-reaching changes, the business operated efficiently and profitably, signaling a successful transition from the public sector to the private sector. I'm acutely aware that the real information of interest to our shareholders is the nuts and bolts and dollars and cents. Consequently, I'll make way for our Managing Director, Mr. Barrett, to give his account of the recently completed financial year and to begin the dialogue about the way forward. However, before I hand over to Mr. Barrett, on behalf of the Board of Directors, I must sincerely commend the management and staff of Wigton, who rose to meet the challenges of a year in which it was anything but business as usual. Particularly impressive was the management team's agile response to the COVID-19 pandemic, which served to neutralize numerous potential threats the pandemic posed to our operations. I'd like to thank all our shareholders for the trust you have reposed in the company. We will endeavor to ensure that your faith in us is not misplaced. I thank you. I will now invite our Managing Director, Mr. Earl Barrett, to deliver his presentation.
Chairman Oliver, thank you. Members of the Board of Directors, members of management and staff, shareholders present, and persons joining us online, ladies and gentlemen, good morning.
Good morning.
Let me also welcome you all to the first annual general meeting of Wigton Windfarm since its successful initial public offering and listing on the Jamaica Stock Exchange. History as a subject was not endearing to me during my high school years, but it is only in my adult life that I truly learned the value of looking back and be able to chart a better way forward. This morning, we'll be taking a look at the past financial year and sharing with you as much as we can our intent for the future of Wigton Windfarm. Quick reminder of our core business. A year is not a long time, but for some people, a year could be very long. So just in case you are not fully remembering what it is you have joined up with. The Wigton Windfarm owns and operates generating facilities of 62.7 megawatts of electricity, which is supplied to the public electricity grid. We still have the record of being the largest wind farm in the English-speaking Caribbean. The facility comprises 3 phases. Phase 1, which was commissioned in 2004, has 23 turbines rated at 900 kilowatts each for a total capacity of 20.7 megawatts. Phase 2, which was commissioned in 2010, has 9 turbines of 2,000 kilowatts each, and Phase 3 has 12 turbines of 2,000 kilowatts each, and that was commissioned in 2016. We are also proud to speak of training and human resource development. We are the operators of Wigton Renewable Energy Training Lab. This is a state-of-the-art learning facility located at the Windfarm complex. At the lab, we offer theoretical and practical training courses in 7 areas of renewable energy. Core courses have achieved the City and Guilds Assured status, along with NCT Vet certification for a number of courses. Looking at some of our core values, Wigton has consistently met or surpassed its business targets. Industry leadership. With over 16 years of experience in renewable energy, the operations of the company enjoys wide-scale recognition as an industry leader across the region. Building local capacity. All operations and major repairs are carried out by a staff of engineers and technicians with very, very minimal addition or ask of any third party, whether local or abroad. Preserving the environment. The energy that's generated from the wind farm avoids the importation of over 120,000 barrels of oil, saving the country valuable foreign exchange. And additionally, in protecting the environment, we also avoid what would have been a natural emission from fossil fuels of 100,000 tons of carbon dioxide. Taking a look at the financial highlights. Despite the challenging times which my chairman spoke about, we ended the year with a net profit of $662 million. I know my finance manager may be saying, why did I leave off the 0.75? So it's 662 million, 0.75 million. There was an increase in net profit of 34% over the prior year. And the prior year was restated to 493 million due to a necessary restating of the deferred tax. This arose because there was an overstatement in 2018-2019. Earnings per share was 6 cents, and this compares very favorable with 4 cents in the prior year. And look at the total assets. Total assets of the company now stands at the end of the year at $10.59 billion, an increase of 10% when compared to the $9.65 billion for the prior year. Average plant availability. It's an area of the plant that we are particularly interested in, and I'll tell you more a little on that. This was 94.6% availability, which is at a world-class level, and that was better than the prior year, which was at This availability allows us to have a production of 157 gigawatt hours of electricity that was exported to the grid. This generated a revenue of $2.42 billion. It was a slight 1% decrease over the $2.45 billion for the prior year. The gross profit from this earnings was $1.6 billion, a 3% decrease when compared to prior year of $1.71 billion. This change was due to lower sales volume because there was lower sales volume and a 3% increase in cost of sales. What are the factors that affect production? There are two main factors that we track almost hourly. One is the wind speed, the velocity of the wind, which is needed to turn the turbine blades, which convert the wind energy to mechanical energy to electrical energy. Wind speed variation is dependent on climatic condition. That's something we have very little control over. And for those who know that their prayers are answered, we'll ask you here and those in the wider audience to pray that we have strong winds, not hurricanes, but strong winds. It argues well for our production. Wigton also have to have a very rigorous maintenance regime to ensure that the turbines are available when there is a strong wind. We are in an industry that once the wind has passed, you can't catch it back tomorrow. So you need to catch it at the moment. So when you talk about just in time, we have to be there. Output and sales, as I said before, we're 94.6% available, which is good, right there in the top industry standards. And again, we did better than the year before, which was at 93.9. We produced 157 gigawatt hours of energy, and this compared to 164 gigawatts for the prior year because the wind speed was a little higher the prior year. The lower output, again, was due to variation in the wind speed. The financial performance, a little bit more on that. So total revenue was $2.64 billion, decreased 11% compared to the prior years. And again, the change was due to a decline in foreign exchange gain to $34.6 billion, and the year before it was $455.7 billion. Again, because our debt was now denominated in Jamaican currency and not US, so the foreign exchange adjustment that we normally have to make at the end of every year was not as impactful, either positive or negative. Financial performance. Total expense was $1.24 billion, and this was 6% or $68 million more than the 1.17 in the prior year. Increase in expense year on year occurred due to increase in professional fees. And some of these were costs associated with legal and regulatory compliance, directors' fees, insurance premiums, which took a whopping 70% increase. The company benefited from savings, however, on utilities, repairs, and some maintenance charges. What's the total asset of the company? At the year end, the total asset was $10.6 billion. This was 10% gain over the prior year, which was at $9.65 billion. This was mainly due to the increase in the value of current assets to $2.99 billion, which is a 90% higher than the previous year of $1.57 billion. Total liabilities. This stood at $7.14 billion, an increase of $283 million, or 4% higher than the previous year, which was $6.36 billion. The change occurred because of the impact of the implementation of a new standard of lease, a new standard for lease liability, as it complies with ISA 16, and an increase in the deferred tax liabilities. The Series A bond of $710 million is scheduled to be repaid in December of 2020. This resulted in the current liabilities increasing by $847.07 million, up from $161.5 billion for the prior year. Shareholders' equity stands at $3.46 billion, a 24% increase over the $2.79 for the prior year. And earning per stock was 6 cents versus 4 cents. Outlook, which is what we get most of the calls from our shareholders about. What is the future of Wigton? Ladies and gentlemen, the future of Wigton, like most companies, lies in growth and diversification. If there's one thing that I think may come positive of COVID, if I can put those two together, is that businesses must begin to look at how they're going to survive post-COVID. COVID has been a wake-up call. The simple equation that we use to look at spending $1, making $2 is going to require much more imagination and effort on all our parts. Our last 12 months, the company has been busy exploring potential projects in local and regional markets. But for the onset of COVID-19 pandemic, which has put most investments on hold, we were reasonably sure of presenting to shareholders at this first annual general meeting at least one project that would have been showing expansion. So we continue to prepare aggressively for the implementation in the post-pandemic era. As we often say when we meet either with the board or the management, we want to be at the starting blocks, not in the warm-up area when this pandemic would have been history. We want to be out there and running, and we don't want to make any false start either. Ladies and gentlemen, while Wigton always operated at a world-class standard, the transition to private sector via listing on the Jamaica Stock Exchange brought its fair shares of challenges. But I'm pleased to say we weathered them well. Let me say a special thank you to all our employees for their consistent commitment and hard work, which has ensured that the plant continued to operate at a world-class level, even while negotiating the changing times, especially those to do with the pandemic. I want for a moment, those of you who are familiar with the wind turbines, and try to figure out how we practice social distancing when you are in a nacelle. And no single person is supposed to go out on any job on the plant. Safety requires a minimum of 2, and 2 persons in a cramped space practicing social distancing. And as the chairman pointed out, we have managed with innovative ways to keep the plant running. We are one of the industry you could consider as essential. When there was the nightly curfews, we could have shown our Wigton pass and get past the police blockade because we had to be there to put our power into the grid so people at home can get the use of the electricity. And so a real special thank you to those staff members, the engineers and technicians who have managed to keep the plant running at this very high standard throughout this very challenging period. Thanks to our shareholders for their faith and trust in the company. Please be assured that our passion for being a leader in the local and regional renewable energy market has not wavered, and we will endeavor to continuously try to generate returns on your investment that are commensurate with the market. To our board of directors, present and online, the guidance that you have provided us is greatly appreciated, and we expect to reap the benefits of our collective efforts as we face the uncertainties of the future. And speaking of the future, the COVID pandemic has had a refrain ringing in my mind. It's like the chorus of a song. We hope for the best, but we are prepared for any and all eventualities. Managing in a time of uncertainty can be challenging at the best, and no one can dare to accurately predict what our country and our economy will look like in the post-COVID-19 era. However, it is my sincere wish that the disruption to our lives will be minimal. And it is my resolve that we all will win with Wigton. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Barrett, for your presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now at the question and answer stage of our proceedings, for which we have allocated 30 minutes of our time this morning. Prior to the meeting, questions were submitted to us by email and via WhatsApp. We will do our best to respond to your questions during the time allotted. However, if we are unable to do so, we will put the answers to your questions on our website after the meeting. If you have questions but have not yet submitted them, please do so using the chat feature on YouTube, or you may send them by email to wigton.info@wwfja.com or via WhatsApp to 876-224-0200. I'll ask our communications manager and assistant corporate secretary, Ms. Camille Taylor, to read the questions received thus far. Camille?
Thank you, Chairman. The first question came to us via email. What is the status of the plans to add new revenue streams, and will these efforts detract the company from its core business or complement it?
Thank you, Camille. I will ask our managing director to address that question.
Thank you, Chair. As was pointed out briefly in part of the presentation I made, that we will be seeking, the company has to expand, the company has to grow, and whereas we will be focused on maintaining aspects of our core business, in the new environment that we see emerging, we certainly will have to diversify. And that diversification is not just looking away from wind to solar to hydro to fuel cells to hydrogen for motor vehicle and for generating electricity, and possible to pump storage, but certainly looking in other areas of business. So you will hear the buzz in Jamaica now that we ought to truly get to a stage that we talked about decades ago, that we should be feeding ourselves. We should be eating what we grow and grow what we eat. So if farming is where it's going to take us to be a profitable and robust company, then we would want to keep all options on the board. Of course, ensuring that renewable energy plays a significant part in it, or as much as is possible.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett.
This question came via WhatsApp. How often is it expected that the company will pay dividends?
Okay, so I'll take that question. It is the board's intention to consider dividends on a quarterly basis. However, our payment of dividends will be subject to the company ensuring that it retains the requisite level of resources by way of its cash resources to finance its operating business, as well as to put up the necessary capital that the company will need when we have projects to finance. You'll recognize that the nature of the business as is today is one where our projects are quite large and as such demand a significant amount of capital to implement. So while we will consider borrowing, we will also, as a company, we must have the requisite level of equity to support any debt financing that we contemplate. So we recognize that shareholders will be looking forward to dividends, but it will be a balancing act in terms of ensuring that when we do pay dividends, we are also recognizing that and ensuring that we retain sufficient resources to drive the business and therefore your shareholder value going forward.
A question via YouTube. Will Wigton be going back to the market shortly to raise equity capital for any new projects? And also, would it be an APO or a rights issue consideration?
Mr. Barrett, may I turn to you?
We're passing this one around. That's an option that's always open. We know what our cash reserves are looking like. To give an example, if there was to be a call by the government of Jamaica for additional renewable energy to go on the grid, there's a stipulation in the Jamaican market for such call that whoever is going to make a bid, which of course Wigton would be in that group, would have to have a minimum of 20% equity. So you could only borrow up to 80%. So chances are that for any sizable project, Wigton will be going back to the market or seeking funds. The methodology will be dependent on where the project is being implemented and also the amount of resources that's required to do that project. So for that answer, quite likely, we would be going back to market in some fashion.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett.
A question via email. Are there any discussions taking place with any country outside of Jamaica in terms of establishing and operating renewable energy plants?
Mr. Barrett, please excuse your popularity this morning.
The answer to that is yes, and it is in more than one country within the region.
Another question via email. Does the company own the lands the wind turbines are located on, and what are the plans to maximize land use?
We do not own the land. At the time when the project Wigton 1 started, and all through 3 phases, the company was owned by the government. The government at that time, even when approached by management about trying to acquire that land, because that plateau happens to be one of the sweet spots for wind in Jamaica. Apart from the John Crow and Blue Mountain area, which is considered pristine forestry, that may be the sweetest spot. We like to talk about the sweet spot for wind. Where we are located is such an area, so we would have liked to acquire it. But the land also owned by 2 bauxite companies, Jamalco or Gisco and Gisco Alpart, they have bauxite reserves still on the land. So interspersed, or the turbines are interspersed between pockets of bauxite. So they have an interest in retaining that. I could see a time in the future where an approach could be made to them where they decide that we can forego that, or we could sell it to you with the rights that we can take that back out. Because I see in the very distant future that wind will be part of the landscape of renewable, and that plateau will see wind turbines. And it has the capacity to take more than we have there now. But to answer that question shortly, we do not own the land. The land is being used by about 47 or 48 small farmers with lots from 5 to 25 acres, which they have in cultivation or cattle rearing year on year.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett.
A question via social media. Why is the share price falling and what will be done about it?
I'll take that question. The company does not manage its share price. Our job is to ensure that we operate the company in the most profitable manner and allow the market to determine the price of the shares. I think it's fair to say that the movement that you've seen in the Wigton share, recognizing that the stock has traded above its listing price, also has an effect because of the movement of the general market will also have an effect on Wigton's shares. So, as I said earlier, we as a company cannot manage the share price. We ensure that the fundamentals of the company are strong, and we will continue to allow the market to price the shares on the Jamaica Stock Exchange. But rest assured, we are committed to operating this company in a very profitable manner, and that should redound to the benefit of all shareholders in respect of the ultimate performance of the stock price on the exchange.
A question via WhatsApp. I bought shares, but there is no indication that I received a dividend. How can I check on this?
I'll ask our finance manager and company secretary to respond to that question.
Okay, Chair, thank you. Wigton Windfarm paid a dividend on August 13th. The funds were sent to shareholders' bank account via the Jamaica Central Securities Depository Limited, JCSD. And if they had your banking information, they would have transferred the funds to you, or if not, they would have sent it via check, and this was done via the postal system. If you are not in receipt of the payment, you can call JCSD, and I'm sure they'll be delighted to trace that payment for you.
Thank you, Mrs. Treasurer.
A question via YouTube from Mr. David Rose. Will Wigton look to engage in joint ventures or explore other partnerships when entering into other Caribbean countries?
Mr. Barrett, you're so well positioned to answer that question.
It is part of the plan that we roll out to every Caribbean territory that we have visited and seek to do business. We have been acutely aware of how the world, or the rest of the world, or the developed world, have treated Caribbean countries or developing countries, wherein capital would go in and capital would say, it's my money, so I can take back out all of the profit. We have seen this as being objectionable. Not that the countries don't need direct foreign investment, but we are wedded to seeking partnerships. And every country that we have gone into and sat and talked with potential investors, developers, we have offered to them straight up front that we're seeking to have local partnership in what we do. And it has a number of benefits to it.
A question via YouTube. Will Wigton's contribution to the grid help to lower electricity costs for consumers?
Mr. Barrett?
Yes. It is doing that now. It's not a matter of if. It is doing that now. But the point is, because the proportion that Wigton puts into the grid, if we are, say, at 6% of what the grid capacity, when you put that 6% into the mix of JPS peak load of 600 or 700 megawatts. It is a very small percentage, so you would not necessarily see it unless you walk around with a calculator every month to see what renewable could have added to it. But we go in cheaper than most others. I think there's only one other company in Jamaica now that supply electricity to the grid that is lower than Wigton, and or maybe two at the most. And so it does make an impact when it is calculated, but because it's so small at this time, you may not see a big reflection that that's what it's making. But as more renewable go onto the grid, you certainly will see lowering of your electricity bill, because renewable, by and large, is at a lower price than fossil fuel generated energy at this point.
A question from shareholder Mr. Patrick Fletcher. Why are we not selling our carbon credit?
We were one of the first companies in this region to have traded carbon credit in the early days. Although we are registered, and I think the registration is just about running out now and we can renew it, but what had happened is that because some of the big countries, China, the US, Brazil, I think India to a certain extent, had dropped out of the trading of carbon credit or would not support the Kyoto Protocol before it changed, the market had gotten to be uneconomical. So to have done the audit to say you really save this much from using fossil fuel, or you had carbon dioxide emission was lowered so much, what you find was that companies were not willing to pay for it. Those countries who have been paying because they couldn't meet the agreed protocols had stopped offering to pay for it. And so at the moment, there is no trading. But again, to reinforce, we were the first, and I think maybe still the only Caribbean country that was trading carbon credit on the world market. And we certainly look forward to do that if the market is revived.
Does the company have any plans to diversify into solar?
The answer is yes. And one of the training courses that we run at the training center covers all aspects of solar energy. As you know, solar is solar thermal, it's solar PV for electricity generation, it's concentrating solar, which you can generate steam to operate steam turbines. We have in the past made overtures to the owners of the land, to the ministry, to try to intersperse solar energy on that same plot of land where we have the wind turbines. Again, it's a very complex process. We have not given up on that idea because we are looking to do solar in other areas of Jamaica and in other countries in the region. So as we say, we are really, I think the name sometimes is a misnomer for us. Although we are a wind farm, we are really a renewable energy company. And we see further diversification within that sphere as we move a little away from our core business. So solar is on the horizon.
A discussion is developing online in the chat on YouTube, and our shareholders are asking if you could just further explain the concept of carbon credits.
Carbon credit came about when the world sat down and looked at what CO2 as one of the greenhouse gases was doing to the environment. Those who believe in it, and I won't look north and call any names of people with blonde hair and skin, the scientists have, in my mind, convinced me and many others in the world, these greenhouse gases are having a negative impact on the environment. Whether it be heavier showers of rain, whether it be more flooding, forest fires. You see all of Australia was almost wiped out the other day, and California is still on fire, and some of the Midwestern states. So they say we really need to curtail this as one of the quick fixes. It was considered a low-hanging fruit. What the developed countries were saying that whatever target you set for us, we can't meet it in the short term. But for the countries that are able to do it, like say Jamaica, who is developing, they could put in place, when they use fossil fuel, which is the burning of fossil fuel that creates a lot of the CO2, if those countries would be putting in systems that are not using fossil fuel, they'll be able to say to us, look, for every ton of carbon dioxide that would have been put into the atmosphere, that you use renewable energy to generate that electricity rather than fossil fuel, we will pay you X dollars per ton. And that credit will go to that country that is paying for it. So, for example, if the United States was saying we wanted to drop our carbon emission by 100,000 tons, but we can't do it for the next 2 years. So they would link up with the carbon credit registry, who would say Jamaica can do that. And so the US would pay into that fund that we would get $10 US or $5 US per ton for the carbon dioxide that was not put into the atmosphere because JPS didn't have to burn fossil fuel to generate that electricity.
Another question via YouTube. Will Wigton make provisions for the purchase, installation, and maintenance of domestic household renewable energy technologies?
Could you just repeat that for me?
Will Wigton make provisions for the purchase, installation, and maintenance of domestic household renewable technologies? Will we be providing any domestic energy solutions?
No, we would be prepared to do the installation. But there are provisions that the government have in place through, I think, the Development Bank of Jamaica, where they actually will come in to do the audit, see what it is that you require, help that household or that business to become energy efficient, and thereafter give what should be a concessionary loan for persons to do the installation of green energy, solar, as the question asked. But Wigton itself, that requires you to be some sort of a lending institution or financial institution, which we are not. What we provide, however, is the training. We train at our training lab, solar installation, as I said, thermal, solar concentrated, and solar PV, which is electricity generation.
Another question. Why was 75% of profit retained and not paid as dividends?
Could you repeat the question? Why was
75% profit retained and not paid as dividends?
Well, it takes me back to the response I gave earlier, that the company, in contemplating payment of dividends, must ensure that it retains sufficient capital to run the business efficiently and to be ready to invest in new capital projects, which the company will undertake going forward. So we do an assessment of our cash needs, we assess our cash pool, and we then, through our audit and finance committee, make a determination as to the level of dividends that it would be prudent to pay. And it's that type of assessment which results in the retention of the level of profits that we have retained for the past year. And as we go forward, we will be doing similar assessment, but you can be assured that the protection of the viability of the business will be paramount while we respect the need to pay dividends at a level that generates a minimum level of return, an appropriate level of return to our shareholders.
And the final question, as the segment allotted for question and answers is coming to a close, Kindly give me reasons to hold my shares in Wigton Windfarm.
Mr. Barrett, what reason can you give our shareholders?
The first and the last. Simple reason. I would want to think that for the reason that 31,000 persons went out to buy the shares, looking at energy as a good investment. And let me just back up a little bit. Any modern economy, I would say the lifeblood of it is energy. And unless you want to go back to 400 years ago when we were chopping down all the trees to cook and to create light at night. So energy is here to stay with us in whatever form. And as I said earlier, Wigton is not seeing itself just as a wind energy generation company. It's seeing itself as an energy company that is seeking to further diversify. The shares of Wigton, I think, are solid. The performance of all stock exchanges across the world are challenged during this time. Persons are a little skittish as to what tomorrow will bring. Companies are having to cut back on their output. And as I said earlier, we could have taken bets among ourselves that we were going to come to this AGM with an expansion project. The pandemic has slowed things down a little bit. And I would say, as I see some financial analysts are advising, when they give an overall picture on shares in the market, they would have Wigton as one of the shares that you hold on to tightly. Well, tightly is my word. They didn't put title there, but they say hold. And the hold was bold.
Mr. Barrett, could you say something about the government's direction as regards the future direction for renewable energy?
Okay. The government, coming out of the last administration, which is still the present set of government, but the last Minister of Energy, I think a lot of you will recall that she had made a public announcement that the government was seeking to take renewable up to 50% of our energy consumption in Jamaica. As we speak, we are below 20%. So what we're looking at is that we have quite a gap between the target and where we are now. So what that says to me that there is a big piece of the pie that we can hold on to. And of course, we'll be competing with others, but we think we are up to the task to run a good race for any time there's a call for renewable energy in Jamaica and other Caribbean islands for that matter. So the government is looking at it that way, and the government, I think, one of the things that I can say of both political parties that have formed the government in Jamaica, they may disagree on a lot of things and ways they would wish to do them. But the very survival of Wigton to go to divestment was, to me, a clear indication that they recognize that renewable energy is here to stay. Hence, I would want to say government is fully supportive of it. Governments, as government do, not just in Jamaica, tend to move a little pedantic at times. So whereas I would have wanted to see us having a Wigton having 200 megawatts online, the government seemed to have a slightly different timetable as to how they get things done. We, for whatever advocacy we can put there, we have set ourselves or aligned ourselves to work with all the ministers that take up that position in the Ministry of Energy to see that we can do the, I know some people doesn't like the word lobbying, but let me say advocacy, that we can do the proper advocacy to ensure that renewable energy appetite for Jamaica is not changed. Because the rest of the world is seeing that. You're seeing many articles speaking to COVID is maybe redirecting mankind to say, let us take a look at how we treat with the environment. And having renewable energy as a big part of the portfolio in any government in anywhere in the world must be significant. We see the Arabs now, they're putting up some of the largest solar fields, and they have oil. All of the major oil companies are putting some of their money into renewable energy. So, Chairman, our government maybe just need to be nudged a little bit harder to say that let us go full force to take up all of the renewable energy that this country can manage, and then we look to make up the rest with fossil fuel. If I was sitting anywhere close to the government, I would want to say no license should ever be given for one more fossil fuel plant in Jamaica until we have exhausted all of the renewable energy potential, be it solar, be it wind, be it hydro, be it waste to heat. Let us get all of those on board. Can only benefit Jamaica financially and benefit our country and our children and grandchildren to come environmentally.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett. May I thank Mr. Barrett and Mrs. Treasurer for responding to our shareholders' questions. So shareholders, the time allotted for questions and answers has now been exhausted, but please be reminded that if you submitted questions that the responses were not given to this morning, that those answers will be posted on the company's website post this meeting. So I thank you for your questions, which were all very good questions. We appreciate it because it helps us in our running of the business. We will now move to the auditor's report, which has been circulated to the shareholders. And I'd like to invite Mrs. Tricia Ann Smith da Silva, partner at PricewaterhouseCoopers Jamaica, to read the auditor's report.
Thank you, Chairman Oliver. Good afternoon, directors, management, and shareholders. Independent Auditor's Report. To the members of Wigton Windfarm Limited, report on the audit of the financial statements, or opinion. In our opinion, the financial statements give a true and fair view of the financial position of Wigton Windfarm Limited, the company, as at 31 March 2020, and of its financial performance and its cash flows for the year then ended in accordance with International Financial Reporting Standards, IFRS, and with the requirements of the Jamaican Companies Act. What we have audited: Wigton Windfarm Limited's financial statements comprise the Statement of Financial Position as at 31 March 2020, the Statement of Comprehensive Income for the year then ended, the Statement of Changes in Equity for the year then ended, the Statement of Cash Flows for the year then ended, and the notes to the financial statements, which include significant accounting policies. Basis for opinion: we conducted our audits in accordance with International Standards on Auditing, ISOs. Our responsibilities under those standards are further described in the auditor's responsibilities for the audit of the financial statements section of our report. We believe that the audit evidence we have obtained is sufficient and appropriate to provide a basis for our opinion. Independence. We are independent of the company in accordance with the International Ethics Standards Board for Accountants Code of Ethics for Professional Accountants. We have fulfilled our other ethical responsibilities in accordance with the IESBA Code. Our audit approach: audit scope. As part of designing our audit, we determined materiality and assessed the risk of material misstatement in the financial statements. In particular, we considered where management made subjective judgments, for example, in respect of significant accounting estimates that involved making assumptions and considering future events that are inherently uncertain. As in all of our audits, we also address the risk of management override of internal controls, including, among other matters, consideration of whether there was evidence of bias that represented a risk of material misstatement due to fraud. We tailored the scope of our audit in order to perform sufficient work to enable us to provide an opinion on the financial statements as a whole, taking into account the structure of the company, the accounting processes and controls, and the industry in which a company operates. Key audit matters. Key audit matters are those that, in our professional judgment, were of most significance in our audit of the financial statements of the current period. These matters were addressed in the context of our audit of the financial statements as a whole and informing our opinion thereon, and we do not provide a separate opinion on these matters. We have determined that there are no key audit matters to communicate in our report. Other information. Management is responsible for the other information. The other information comprises the annual report, but does not include the financial statements and our auditor's report thereon, which is expected to be made available to us after the date of this auditor's report. Our opinion on the financial statements does not cover the other information, and we will not express any form of assurance conclusion thereon. In connection with our audit of the financial statements, our responsibility is to read the other information identified above when it becomes available, and in doing so, consider whether the other information is materially inconsistent with the financial statements or our knowledge obtained in the audit, or otherwise appears to be materially misstated. When we read the annual report, if we conclude that there is a material misstatement therein, we are required to communicate the matter to those charged with governance. Responsibilities of management and those charged with governance for the financial statements. Management is responsible for the preparation of the financial statements that give a true and fair view in accordance with IFRS and with the requirements of the Jamaican Companies Act, and for such internal control as management determines is necessary to enable the preparation of financial statements that are free from material misstatement, whether due to fraud or error. In preparing the financial statements, management is responsible for assessing the company's ability to continue as a going concern, disclosing, as applicable, matters related to going concern, and using the going concern basis of accounting unless management either intends to liquidate the company or to cease operations or has no realistic alternative but to do so. Those charged with governance are responsible for overseeing the company's financial reporting process. Auditor's responsibility for the audit of the financial statements. Our objectives are to obtain reasonable assurance about whether the financial statements as a whole are free from material misstatement, whether due to fraud or error, and to issue an auditor's report that includes our opinion. Reasonable assurance is a high level of assurance, but is not a guarantee that an audit conducted in accordance with ISOs will always detect a material misstatement when it exists. Misstatements can arise from fraud or error and are considered material if individually or in the aggregate, they could reasonably be expected to influence economic decisions of users taken on the basis of these financial statements. As part of an audit in accordance with ISOs, we exercise professional judgment and maintain professional skepticism throughout the audit. We also identify and assess the risk of material misstatement of the financial statements, whether due to fraud or error, design and perform audit procedures responsive to those risks, and obtain audit evidence that is sufficient and appropriate to provide a basis for our opinion. The risk of not detecting a material misstatement resulting from fraud is higher than for one resulting from error, as fraud may involve collusion, forgery, intentional omissions, misrepresentations, or the override of internal control. Obtain an understanding of internal control relevant to the audit in order to design audit procedures that are appropriate in the circumstances, but not for the purpose of expressing an opinion on the effectiveness of the company's internal control. Evaluate the appropriateness of accounting policies used and the reasonableness of accounting estimates and related disclosures made by management. Conclude on the appropriateness of management's use of the going concern basis of accounting, and based on the audit evidence obtained, whether a material uncertainty exists related to events or conditions that may cast significant doubt on the company's ability to continue as a going concern. If we conclude that a material uncertainty exists, we are required to draw attention in our auditor's report to the related disclosures in the financial statements, or, if such disclosures are inadequate, to modify our opinion. Our conclusions are based on the audit evidence obtained up to the date of our auditor's report. However, future events or conditions may cause the company to cease to continue as a going concern. Evaluate the overall presentation, structure, and content of the financial statements, including the disclosures, and whether the financial statements represent the underlying transactions and events in a manner that achieves fair presentation. We communicate with those charged with governance regarding, among other matters, the planned scope and timing of the audit and significant audit findings, including any significant deficiencies in internal control that we identified during our audit. We also provide those charged with governance with a statement that we have complied with relevant ethical requirements regarding independence, and to communicate with them our relationships and other matters that may reasonably be thought to bear on our independence and, where applicable, related safeguards. From the matters communicated with those charged with governance, we determined those matters that were of most significance in the audit of the financial statements of the current period and are therefore the key audit matters. We describe these matters in our audit report unless law or regulation precludes public disclosure about the matter, or when, in extremely rare circumstances, we determine a matter should not be communicated in our report because the adverse consequences of doing so would reasonably be expected to outweigh the public interest benefits of such communication. Report on other legal and regulatory requirements. As required by the Jamaican Companies Act, we have obtained all the information and explanations which, to the best of our knowledge and belief, were necessary for the purposes of our audit. In our opinion, proper accounting records have been kept so far as appears from our examination of those records, and the accompanying financial statements are in agreement therewith and give the information required by the Jamaican Companies Act in the manner so required. The engagement partner on the audit resulting in this independent auditor's report is Trisha Ann Smith da Silva, signed PricewaterhouseCoopers, Chartered Accountants, 13th July 2020, Kingston, Jamaica.
Thank you, Mrs. Smith da Silva. I will now ask our Corporate Secretary to table, as is required, the accounts of the company, along with the annual report and the auditor's report. Mrs. Treasurer.
So table, Chair.
Thank you, Mrs. Treasurer. We will now deal with voting on resolutions for this meeting. We have 6 resolutions to consider, all of which were contained in the notice of the AGM, which was circulated to shareholders as stipulated in the Companies Act and pursuant to the order of the court in claim number 2020 CD 00227. However, we'll ask our company communications manager and assistant corporate secretary to read each resolution. Firstly, we will deal with ordinary business, and resolution number 1 concerns the adoption of the audited accounts. More specifically, to receive the audited accounts of the company for the year ended March 31st, 2020, and the report of the auditors circulated therewith. Camille?
Resolution number 1, that the audited accounts for the year ended March 31, 2020, and the report of the auditors circulated with the notice convening the meeting be and are hereby adopted.
May I ask a shareholder to move the motion? Okay. May I ask a shareholder to second the motion? Thank you, Mr. Issa. All in favor? All against? Can declare. I declare the motion carried. Resolution number 2 concerns the ratification of the dividend, more specifically, to declare the interim dividend paid on August 13, 2020 as the final for the year ended March 31st, 2020. Camille?
Resolution number 2, that as recommended by the directors, the interim dividend of $0.0025 per stock unit paid on August 13, 2020 to shareholders on record at the close of business on June 16, 2020 be declared as final, and no further dividend be paid in respect of the year ended March 31, 2020.
May I ask a shareholder to move the motion? Yeah. And Mr. Isa? Yes. Seconded by? Okay, then. All in favor? All against? I declare the resolution carried. Resolution 3.1 concerns the election of directors. More specifically, that in accordance with Article 105 of the Company's Articles of Incorporation, Dennis Chung, Dan Thiok, Omar Razan, having been appointed as additional directors, shall retire and, being eligible, offer themselves for re-election. Camille?
Resolution 3.1a, that Director Dennis Chung, retiring pursuant to Article 105 of the Company's Articles of Incorporation, be and is hereby re-elected a director of the company.
May I ask a shareholder to move the motion? Yes. Thank you. May I ask a shareholder to second the motion? All in favor? All against? I declare the motion carried. Camille?
That Director Dan Thiok, retiring pursuant to Article 105 of the Company's Articles of Incorporation, be and is hereby re-elected a director of the company.
May I ask a shareholder to move the motion? Jackie. May I ask a shareholder to second the motion? Mr. Chung. All in favor? All against? I declare the motion carried. Camille?
Resolution 31C, that Director Omar Azan, retiring pursuant to Article 105 of the company's Articles of Incorporation, be and is hereby re-elected a director of the company.
May I ask a shareholder to move the motion? May I ask a shareholder to second the motion? Jackie, thank you. All in favor? All against? I declare the motion carried. Resolution 3I deals with directors retiring from office by rotation pursuant to Article 101 of the company's Articles of Incorporation are Nigel Davey and Hugh Johnson, who, being eligible, offer themselves for re-election. Camille?
Resolution 32A, that retiring Director Nigel Davey be and is hereby re-elected a director of the company.
May I ask a shareholder to move the motion? Mr. Barrett, thank you. May I ask a shareholder to second the motion? Thank you, Ms. Chinlan. All in favor? All against? I declare the motion carried. Camille?
That retiring Director Hugh Johnson be and is hereby re-elected a director of the company.
May I ask a shareholder to move the motion? May I ask a shareholder to second the motion? Jackie, thank you. All in favor? All against? I declare the motion carried. Resolution 4 concerns directors' remuneration. Camille?
Resolution 4.1, that the remuneration of the directors be fixed by the Nominations and Compensation Committee of the Board.
May I ask a shareholder to move the motion? Thank you. May I ask a shareholder to second the motion? All in favor? All against? I declare the motion carried.
Resolution 4.2, that the remuneration of the Managing Director be fixed by the Nomination and Compensation Committee of the Board.
May I ask a shareholder to move the motion? Thank you, Mr. Chung. May I ask a shareholder to second the motion? Dan, thank you, Mr. Thiok. All in favor? All against? I declare the motion carried. Resolution 5 concerns the appointment and remuneration of our auditors. Camille?
Resolution 5, that PricewaterhouseCoopers, having signified their willingness to serve, continue in office as auditors of the company pursuant to Section 154 of the Companies Act, to hold office until the conclusion of the next annual general meeting at a remuneration to be fixed by the directors of the company.
May I ask a shareholder to move the motion? Thank you, Mr. Chung. Thank you, Ms. Chinlan. All in favor? All against? I declare the resolution carried. Resolution 6. We will now deal with Resolution 6, which falls under special business, and I'll now turn the podium over to our Company Secretary, who will take us through this segment. Mrs. Treasurer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Resolution 6 deals with the reappointment of directors over the age of 70. Camille?
Resolution 6-1, that Oliver Holmes, who attained the age of 70, be reappointed a director of the company pursuant to Article 91 of the company's Articles of Incorporation.
May I ask the shareholder to move the motion? Jack. Okay, Jackie Stewart, Lakewood. May I ask the shareholder to second the motion? Earl Barrett. Thank you. All in favor? Thank you. All against? Great. I declare the motion carried. Camille?
Resolution 6-2, that Gregory Shirley, who attained the age of 70, be reappointed a director of the company pursuant to Article 91 of the company's Articles of Incorporation.
May I ask a shareholder to move the motion? Thank you, Mr. Barrett. Thank you, Michelle. All in favor? All against? I declare the motion carried. Chair, that's it for me.
Thank you, Madam Corporate Secretary, and thank you, Camille. Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of today's proceedings. Thank you for joining us in person as well as on live stream. May I ask you to continue to keep safe, and we certainly look forward to your participation next year when we do this all over again. Thank you all, and have a very safe and enjoyable afternoon.